Okay, so thank you, Malika and Ankita, for joining us today and talking about social design and care in this like unprecedented like time of COVID and the pandemic. So I'll just tell the viewers a little bit about you guys. So Ankita is like a senior service designer at IDEO.org. Before that, she worked for Memorial Slogan Cataract Cancer and the in-house innovation team, as well as the International Rescue Committee and the Mayor's Office in New York. She practices systems-oriented design and creates people-centered solutions. Likewise, Malika is a creative strategist, designer, performer, and troublemaker. Um, and she's working in Singapore at Grab as the senior design and strategist. And she was born in Tehran and has a lot of like cultural experience. So that's why she has like a knack for belonging and innovation. So thank you guys for taking the time out and having this conversation with me today. Talking about design in this pandemic, what are you guys working on currently? We can start with Ankita.
Thank you, Mash. What a lovely intro. Um, so I have actually been working on a health equity project, which is very timely, but wasn't planned. It was a project that was a year in the making, and we're only like just started working on it, kind of just as the pandemic hit. So the sort of crux of the project is all about bringing a lot of multidisciplinary, it sounds like the transdisciplinary design program but for healthcare. So it's all about bringing in multidisciplinary people from all over the US, both from like academia, activism, community organizing, like all sorts of different disciplines, to really tackle some of the structural and systemic issues that lead to isms in healthcare, like racism, ableism, ageism. So it's been a really interesting and different design project for me because as a designer or the design team, our role has been to create the space for others to come and work on solutions and give their perspective rather than like the designers having to synthesize everything and like come up with a solution. So that's been pretty unique, and that's what's been keeping me busy these last few months.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really interesting because I think right now, especially with the pandemic, like talking about like health and like mental health right now, it's really like how to like take care of yourselves when it's like when you're in this quarantine space and you can't actually see loved ones and family members and friends on a daily basis, but through these like online sessions. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Malika, can you tell me what you're working at Grab these days?
A little bit about Grab. Grab is transportation and food delivery and a lot of other services in Southeast Asia. And I'm specifically focused on working with merchants to enable them to merchants, mostly food and beverage merchants that are basically are in danger of getting out of business right now because of the COVID situation and having all the dining options closed. So I'm working with my team on developing solutions for them to basically expand their online business and delivery businesses and find new channels and outlets for running their business and finding new revenue channels and communicating with their customers in new ways and innovative ways. So that's what I've been working on in different capacities with my team.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I know like that would have been a challenge, like especially with like transportation, like mobilization has been completely come to a standstill. So yeah, innovating new alternate ways for that is really interesting. Um, so
Right.
um, Can you like tell a bit more about the transportation thing? Because I know like over here in Pakistan, people would be wondering like, how is that like innovating in that space? What does that look like?
Sure. Yeah, I think my focus is more on enabling merchants to run their business. So when people don't come to their restaurants and their stores, they need like they are mostly used to the old-fashioned way of running businesses, and a lot of the smaller merchants, as we call them, long tail here. And how can we basically fast educate them and onboard them with the new technologies to adopt their business models to these new things that are maybe more common in Western countries, or are like not in a normal or pre-COVID era of like lifestyle. So kind of onboarding them fast and considering the low-tech savviness of the people in the area as well. So that's another challenge that we have. So these are the things that we have been focusing on, and it's like a challenge, and it needs a lot of resources and thinking to push that forward and make sure that as much as we can, we help businesses to stay um, um, connected with their customers and can find new ways of communicating and selling their goods and having new channels to run that cash flow. So this is how we like consider and like talk when we talk about social mobilization. It's about like adopting these new technologies, a new lifestyle, and creating new mediums for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, especially I think with this like pandemic, like one of those things that have like materialized is like those things that were invisible before, like the like you said, like the lack of resources, like how to like tap into the people who are not that have that much access to technology, etc., how to mobilize them and bring them on board more. So have you seen certain changes that like I know you guys like Grab is doing it, like has like other of like Singapore and New York as well, like how are they adapting to this times of like when things are we're seeing when there are like gaps in systems, and a lot of like systemic and racial profiling is also emerging at this time. So what changes are you seeing in these coming up?
It's really interesting. Like Singapore and Southeast Asia is like a bit different because Singapore is pretty tech savvy and everything is automized. And what has been is super interesting for me is that how fastly everybody started picking up new things, new routines. For example, in Singapore, you have to sign in, check in every single building that you enter in, and send the data to the cloud, and government tracks for contact tracing. And before the pandemic, this was nothing that I would imagine doing in daily basis. And now it became my second nature. And like now it's something that everybody does. There are some questions. Is it a good thing? How can this be misused? And what's the like unseen implication of that? And but at the same time, you want to be safe. You do it. It's the law here, so you get on board with it easily. And something that was very surprising to me because I recently moved here was how open the culture is to these type of structure and laws versus when I was living in the US or my home country, Iran. This usually there will be a lot of resistance towards adopting these things. And where does this new ways of living and new innovative way of tackling the social issues get inserted to the daily lifestyle of people I think is really important. And how do we find the entry point and channel based on the culture? It's something that strikes me. And that's something that I think when we talk about the culture, it's something to consider. Another thing when we talk about Southeast Asia is that, again, Singapore is different than most of the countries in the region. And you see that how big tech companies, because most of these technologies come from a lot of countries with a lot of focus on technology, either China or the US, that provide these phones and devices that actually enables us to use these technologies. And now we see Apple and Google selling these low price phones. Is half of the price that we used to pay, right? And I wonder that, okay, now everybody can have access to good quality devices, or at least more than what we used to. And what does that mean for regions that were not that financially affluent? And in a year or two, how would people pick up everything that was a norm in other countries? And it becomes a thing that everybody uses, everybody has access to. And how can we, there is like so many things that we can do that we are not able to do right now in a year or two with the access to these type of technologies. I talk about technology because it's my main focus, but it's something that I think I see that is changing access and normalization of it in the culture.
I'm gonna build off of Millie because I think you hit such an important point around technology, and that's been a huge thing. I have been thinking about as we have entered COVID lands, that in one way it's at least in the US, it's highlighted the technology deserts, I guess, that we've had in certain communities, because overnight everything became digital, work became digital, school became digital, healthcare became digital. And prior to working in my current job now, I was working in a healthcare institution, so there was a big push to make everything telehealth and digital. And there's so many advantages to that we now see. But yet it's like kind of also what you were saying, Malika, earlier about the merchants that you're working with, the adoption and like people who just weren't used to it. Like it's actually still been quite hard to get all of those folks onboarded and now used to this thing that the rest of the population is so digitally literate. And I think that's like a tension for me when we're designing solutions moving forward of like how are we constantly designing things, with the sort of like mindset of this is going to be the future, but also like bringing people who might not be so used to it and making sure that they're being able to also do it. And this sounds like a really tiny thing, but even the project that I just described earlier, it's basically kind of a convening a gathering of about 50 plus people. And within that group, some people are really technologically savvy and some people are less technologically savvy. So even like being thoughtful about, you know, when we're using Zoom, and are we getting people to like go on Google Slides and do things a certain way, like little things like that, I think I'm paying attention to in a way that I before, when you would just have a workshop in person and you're just using paper and post-its, you didn't have to think about it as much. Whereas now, when every interaction has become digital, it just makes you more aware of like what I take for granted about my digital literacy and how that might show up in the things that I design.
Yeah, definitely. I think digital literacy is really something that goes hand in hand with access that you have. A lot of, a lot of places on the earth don't have access to Wi-Fi or good quality internet. And even though that maybe you want to provide services, you cannot, because it's just like, a dead end for a lot of the technological services. And that became super visible during this pandemic, and how people were left in the dark just because they didn't have the infrastructure for like the basic access to these type of services.
Yeah, no, I can completely relate because I think working with the rural communities over here, I think one thing that working with the women, they drastically noticed themselves was like the conventional means of like selling their products and crafts was not going to be possible. So they even had their own like internal like buy-in more like how to gravitate more towards digital means. So we spent with the programs team like 2 months very rigorously developing those skills, like how teach them Facebook, teach them Instagram, teach them how to use Zoom, so they can be more like so they can use these e-commerce portals to actually like sell themselves when the actual pause is going on in the economy right now. So I think another interesting thing is like since we are not meeting each other in person anymore, we're having a lot of these remote gatherings right now. So how is this pandemic making us work together in like new ways remotely?
How long has it been? Since March. Since
Yeah.
March. I think it's amazing if you want to look back. It's not a long time, all right? It's a few months, but I think the norm and the routine has changed so much. And I think 2 months after the lockdown here, I started questioning, okay, will we ever go back to the normal work procedure that we had? Because we used to travel a lot and go to the region, talk to the users and gather information. But those are all conducted remotely now. And I still see there's like a little bit of caveat in it, like the in-person interaction that you have, what you learn by just being in an environment and talking to each other casually. I still cannot find the replacement for that, but there is a lot of new ways of like it made us to be a bit innovative. I feel to just like come up with solutions for working remotely, which I had like never thought of it because I was not forced to do it. And there's a lot of good things that came out of it in terms of the work dynamic and trying to come up with new solutions about how we work together. I think it made us to be a bit more organized, talking from my own experience. When you conduct a session, when you have business meetings and all of these things, because you have to grab everybody's attention in the session. But again, you're losing the touch, and I'm afraid in long term, maybe there is a little bit of disconnectedness between you as a designer and the people that you're designing for, if it continues. And I still haven't found a way to address that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you've said. I think I've been surprised by the inventiveness or like the workarounds. And people always say that when you're going through a difficult time, like that's actually when human creativity comes out the most. Um, so that's been really interesting to see. But at the same time, yeah, there are definitely things that I miss about it's a strange balance because there are days where I actually really love that I wake up and I live in New York, so I have to take the train to work, which is not a good experience. So I enjoy that I now wake up and I can have, 30 minutes of quiet reading time that's not on a subway, and like it starts my morning in a very different way. I love that I can cook myself a home cooked lunch every day if I want to. But yet I miss the community. I miss the the water cooler chats, as people call it. I miss that sometimes you're thinking about something, you're stuck, and you bump into a colleague, and you have that discussion. And that's also been a fear of mine as people are talking about like, oh look, it seems like we can do this now. Remote working works. Let's just work remotely for the rest of our lives. And I'm like, I don't know about that because so much of I think what we do in design relies on those like serendipitous like chats, or someone says something, or someone else is having a conversation and you're not even part of it, but you just get inspired by something they're saying. Um, and those human moments are things I really miss.
Yeah, I said like design is a conversation, and Like
Yeah.
now it became like talking to yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
need the ball. Yeah.
No, definitely. I can completely agree because I am kind of sort of engaged with the community through those Zoom sessions and WhatsApp, but it's not the same as, actually traveling like 5 hours through the minivan or the bus and actually meeting them in person. And like I think we're all like big huggers over here. So actually like having that physical touch is like really missing. So yeah, that bonding, even on WhatsApp, the artisans also say like, man, when will this time be over and we meet in person? So I think that engagement is not the same. I mean, it's nice we can have those conversations and be there for each other in spirit, but it's the tangible is like a totally different level.
Right, definitely.
So I think also for like being like transdisciplinary designers, we always design for the notion of equality and inclusivity. So do you think that will ever be like achieved in the future, or is that like an impossible dream? It's a tough one.
I'll
It
let
is
Malika go.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was like, I'll let Malika go first.
Like being honest, I don't think if we can be 100% inclusive
Hmm.
because like you have like whatever you are designing for, it's a product, it's a service, whatever it is, usually not usually, always you have a target on mind, and that's your main target, that's a main user, and you're providing solution for them. And the argument of inclusive design is to just do not only focus on them and bring in the perspective of minorities in that context to the conversation. And I think there is a lot that we need to do, and it is possible to do that we are not doing right now. Like we are not even close, but 100% I don't think it's practical. It's not what we should aim for. I think why we talk about inclusive design is that currently there is a lot of voices missing in the design process, different contexts, but and we should voice them, like be their voice as a designer, try to advocate for them. And there's a lot to do, but 100% I don't know, it actually benefits the design, to be honest.
Such a good and critical perspective in terms of like inclusive of whom and for what reason and what are we creating. So yeah, I think it depends on the context of what we're making. I think one of the things I've been reflecting a lot on is something a coworker of mine said, which is real change happens at the pace of human relationships. And this idea that like if and like as more and more designers, and if we can become aware of this, that our role in the design process might be at this one phase of it, and we can do the best we can in that, but actually like real social change takes a lot of time. It won't be achieved in a 3-month project or a 1-week design boot camp or a workshop. And I think a big thing that I'm just kind of coming to terms with is that, and that's completely okay. Like, it's okay for me to impact a phase of the process or a piece of this and a piece of that. And I can do my best to make sure that we are inviting as many diverse voices to be a part of that, that we are creating the conditions for safety for people to speak up. But real kind of true social change is a lot more than design. It's community organizing, it's activism, it's like so many more things. And sometimes I feel like there's a bit of a saviorism type of narrative in design, and it's like I don't have to personally be responsible for change at a societal level. Like, let me make sure that the pieces that design does touch, that we do it really intentionally and thoughtfully, but that we are sure to collaborate with people in other disciplines. Like in the last couple of years, I've been working a lot more with data scientists, behavioral scientists, like impact evaluation people. And so many people have been working in the field of social change for so long. And how can we like be better about collaborating with them and kind of making sure that we're like infusing these principles of inclusion and equality and equity in all of these processes, rather than feeling like design must carry the burden of that all the time.
I think there's a like something that at least in design school we always miss talking about is the role of business and designing the
Exactly.
business.
Yeah.
Because being in real in industry, you're working with business, like business
Yep.
target, business the market that you want to reach out to based on those business goals and principles. And it's wrong to put all the burden on on the designer to do that. It is a collective effort to try to address those problems, those um, communities as a whole, as a business, as a team.
As an
And
ecosystem. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And maybe it's something that the designer is responsible to advocate for, but it's not the sole responsible individual in the team to, achieve that goal. It's a effort, collective effort.
Absolutely. I have also been thinking a lot about, like, at least in the US, I don't know if this has been happening. I'd be curious to hear from you guys. There's actually been a lot of criticism of design practices, and that design is um, design, even like human centered design and the design we all love to do, is very biased and it's not inclusive. And I think it's been it's been really interesting to get hear and read about a lot of these criticisms, because I also felt like in our program in transdisciplinary design, we were always critiquing all of those things. And we were like, and now it feels like that conversation is actually becoming more and more mainstream in the design world, which is in a way great, because I think like we're it feels like we're really, I don't know, these last 6 months I kind of feel like we have made much more progress in trying to become aware of all of these faults. And even like within the field of design where we think very human centered, like what can we all be doing better. So I don't know, I do have optimism that these critical conversations are happening in design around how design as a field could be better and more inclusive. And then hopefully as a byproduct of that, all of the people we work with, whether it's like the business teams or the data teams, that we can infuse more of that within those teams as well.
I know. I think, like, I completely agree with you guys. Like, I think achieving it 100% seems like too optimistic and like a utopian thing that like seems impossible. I think, but what I guess you guys were all touching upon is, I guess, it's about the intent and actually incorporating those values into it when we're actually thinking about designing with the communities. Like, actually having that intent to like, okay, the unheard voices must be included, whoever we're working with. So yeah, I think your question about like who are we designing for and who are we designing with? So those people need to be included. It's not just the designers and the client, but the other like who are we doing it with? They need to be part of the process as well.
Definitely. Also, something else, especially when it comes to racism and
Yeah.
tech and those type of ism, as you were talking about, having those people in the process of creation, not only as user, but as the creator of whatever you're creating,
Yeah.
it's something that facilitates that conversation. Like, just giving like it's random example, but for example, if you have a person with disability in your team to design, like who is part of the creation, they definitely think about that, they definitely advocate for that. And because they are the user, they are the target. If you have people who have darker skin tone, if you're creating image processing technology, they are gonna be testing it on themselves first, and then you wouldn't have a lot of issues that we have currently in a lot of
Yes. That
processes.
is spot on. I think yeah, that is such a big big important thing that I think doesn't get enough recognition in the design world, because people are always like, yes, we're designing with, look at us going to these communities, but also like, yeah, most of the designers aren't from those communities or from or have lived experience of that thing that they're designing. And actually that's what makes me proud of this little trio here, because I'm like, look at us, global female designers, good for us.
Yeah, but like to just like call yourself out to like for example, I come from a Western Middle Eastern point of view and working in Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
and it's really important to remind myself every day that
Yeah.
you are not part of the culture. Like, it's still too soon for me to know the culture, and the pandemic actually slowed it down. But um, and like knowing that, okay, you gotta make sure that you are checking in. You're not going by your own default, and checking in with people that
Mhm.
have better exposure than you, at least.
Yeah.
Uh, it's something that we are responsible
Mm-hmm.
about it too, not just putting in on the system. As an individual, I am responsible about it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think over here also, I think I like when you work with the community, you get kind of like sensitized. So you actually learn from them and kind of hear like their stories, like, okay, these are what they're actually feeling. But I feel like when I work with the youth over here who like haven't been like met those artisans in person, so they're just integrating from what they hear on media, etc. So that unchecked bias always comes through. So then it's like about having that conversation, saying like, yeah, that's great, but I think that's what this image that we already have, but it's not necessarily, I mean, that's part of their surface reality, but that's not the only thing they are. So I think having like checking your own bias, and I think that kind of happened with me when I was doing my thesis with the homeless people. So a lot of like self-checking my own and unlearning those biases that were I was carrying with me internally. So that I think that happens when you work with the community, you kind of unlearn and they learn new things. So yeah.
Yeah, Mash, you did that project, and I think it's. I don't know how you like. What's your perspective on that? Because as a person who has been always sheltered and always had a home, like you, how did you tackle that issue of trying to design for homeless people when you never had that experience, when you never were even close, probably, to that experience? And making sure that you're the voice of them, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think I didn't go in there with the intent that I wanted to be the voice for them. I think I went in there because I wanted to like it's kind of also learn. I think it was basically for me it was like a steep learning curve, because I think coming from like um Middle Eastern family, like my parents, when they were even like shifting me to New York, they were always used to say like, you know, like stay away from this community, they're not safe, etc. So I think it was just questioning that and saying like, why should I stay if even when I was like going out first time to like Harlem, I was like super scared, and I think it was like facing my own thing. But I think it was just like putting myself out there, and I think that's why my whole thing wasn't like a solution for them, but I think it was just more like, if you don't know them, how do you like interact with them, how do you meet them with that care, etc. So yeah.
I think a big part of like my design practice these days has been also like, I've been talking about this with my partner, of like being brave enough at moments of like stepping down in a way, because I think so many times we've been taught that like we need to learn how to empathize with this community and that thing, and like that's like the designer's like way of being. And perhaps like sometimes the best things we can do is like imagine a project comes our way and we feel like this is a really worthy project, but actually I as the design, like I'm not the right designer to work on it. Like um maybe we should get like this other person who might be closer to the community, and like let's try to find a designer who had like similar to what you were saying, Melly. Like I actually think a lot of us designers have to do this critical work of questioning like, is every project for us. And it doesn't mean that like I can't, you know, get my empathy skills on and try to understand that community, but also just recognizing that there are some communities that I am not going to be able to represent no matter how hard I try. And actually, like, kind of being brave enough to say that to a supervisor, to a boss, to a teammate. And like, if that becomes more of our practice, perhaps we'll actually also start creating more like pathways for designers who might not have gone to fancy schools. Like, that's just something I think about a lot, that like the design pipeline is like full of people that go to places like Parsons and SBA and those types of things. And there are perhaps like plenty of amazing design researchers and design strategists that we just don't know about. And yes, I don't know, like just being able to sort of step down is a thing I've been reflecting on a lot.
Yeah, to build on top of that, just give you real life example. I think
Sorry, I just said Mash just sent me a message saying she's restarting her computer. I think something happened for her.
Sure.
But you just, we'll have a chat.
Yeah, I was saying that in like very tiny things that you need to acknowledge that you're not the right person for whatever you're working on. It's like, for example, when I came here, I couldn't understand a lot of accents. Like when we were in interview sessions, my whole, like 80% of my attention was to just understand the word, and like didn't have enough bandwidth to, like, you know, even analyze what I'm hearing. And it's very simple. It's like not even like in cultural or like lived experience. Like it's not even that. It's just like communication. And then like my coworkers like would be like this. They would like be in control of the conversation, and it took me a while to get rid of that barrier. And just like knowing, voicing out that, okay, I'm not the right person for this, and letting other people to step in and handle those situations, like instead of you. It's something that is just like being humble, but basically it's helping everybody. It's not being arrogant about what you can do, because especially coming from certain regions, having certain experience in certain schools might give you an illusion that you can do it better than other people, but that's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've been thinking about that a lot as well. I might have like critical design theory. I might know a lot about these types of things. Doesn't mean I am the right designer for every project that comes my way.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think over here also, it's like sometimes when things do come my way, I have to actually say like, I don't know this, but I can do my research and like learn, because I think over here it's like a very small team, as opposed to, I know when I was like working with you guys in New York, we have like this group that we can actually work and share skills with. But like just being like a key, like having that trans D, only one who has the trans D lens over here. So it's not like refusing, but it's more like, okay, I just like acknowledging like, okay, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. And so maybe like someone who does have the skills, like learning from them, and then sharing, like ideating on it further. So yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys, like before I switched off for a bit, we're talking about like empathy. So how do you like do you feel like empathy is necessary when you're designing, or like is that like one of those things that should we work towards, or it's not necessary for every project?
I think like what's the definition of project and the scope of design is really important.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so like, you know, sometimes a project could be designing a button, and like I don't know if you need, like, you still need user perspective for sure, but I think empathy is too much of a big word to use for that process. But sometimes you're trying to change something and trying to innovate a new way of conducting something, and that's when, like, without empathy or something close to that, you fail. um, and and empathy, I think, is used very loosely in design sometimes. um, uh, like, what's the stage of you say that I have empathy versus I don't, like sympathy, empathy, understanding the user, and like differentiating between these, I think it's really important, because I don't have, like, being to the lens, I don't have empathy for every single action I do every day. Sometimes I just design based on experience because I know this is the way to go and it's normal, it benefits the business. But sometimes I need it when I'm like, I think it has a big impact on the livelihood of people and the lifestyle of people. And that's when what we were talking about, like, it's important to check in with yourself and see if you're the right person for that.
Yeah, I really echo what you're saying. It's like I had almost a hard time knowing how to start the answer because like the concept of empathy, I love it, I'm behind it, but it's become also such a buzzword that's like I don't know, it's like it's become a filler where I sometimes don't even know what it means when we say that. And I mean, I'll actually reflect back on my experiences when I was working at the hospital because a lot of what I did was very multi stakeholder. So there were like the patients and the caregivers who were kind of the end users, so to speak. But there were also doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, healthcare administrators who would all be using the product or the service that we would be working towards together. You know, it would be like we would be co-creating something with inputs from like 10 different user groups, some back-end users, some like front-end users to use service design language. And one of the things that was like a big reflection for us is when you try to appease every single person, you actually end up with design that's the lowest common denominator because everything will get chipped away. Like this person doesn't like that, this person doesn't like that. And so there's like there's this dance between truly being empathetic to all of these different user groups so that we are very thoughtfully designing things for all these different people. But there's also best practices in design, and especially when you're starting to get into like UX and product design, like just because someone wants a button here and a feature here doesn't mean we need to make all those things. And so there's like this constant dance between like really listening and empathizing and learning people's context, but then there was like a design expertise around synthesizing that and trying to create like the most simple usable uh, product or service that like actually met people's like true needs versus like I just want this because I like a checklist feature type of thing. So I don't know, I just think there's a constant dance, and it's hard for me to just say that good design is like 100% all the time just empathetic.
Right. I think something that connects back to the like previous conversation that we had is when I did a little bit of acting at school, and like in acting school that when in method acting you're supposed to try to connect back to your own memory of having the same feeling that you have on the stage. And as an actor you're taught to like bring back memories and the situation and try to vividly remember how you felt and try to through that channel the empathy to the character that you're playing in. And I think it's kind of similar to design sometimes if we are talking about empathy, because like I'm now the emergent. I can never, not that I can never be a merchant. I've never been a merchant. I cannot not imagine necessarily how it feels to work in a restaurant environment and be in that busy situation, dealing with a lot of factors. But I can relate back to, I don't know, being in New York subway and trying to read. And this is something that you can put yourself, in those situations and try to see, okay, what would you do as a person in those situations? But at the same time, I'm a pretty tech savvy person. And if I want to design for someone who's very like it's not familiar with technology of any form, I don't know if I can fully empathize. I would rely on my research, and I would rely on what I've been told that the user is having problem with, or is struggling with, and then try to use my best judgment to design for that situation. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's not 100%. It's using your judgment as a designer, as a problem solver, and using your empathy in situations that you can relate to create evocative experiences, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think what I've also noticed over the years, that is like empathy and care is for like different for each individual. I think for each project, and like your how you interact with it changes, because it's like so different when you're designing for here in Pakistan as opposed when I was like designing over there in New York, and when I was like doing those group work with you guys. So it's always different how you interact and how you learn, and like how do you care for some people. And then over here also, like there's always that creative friction that like sometimes it's very hard to like empathize with someone who you're like when you're like whole systems, like when you don't see eye to eye. So like how do you, so I think in those moments, like, okay, I don't completely have to empathize with them like 100%, but maybe I can just like lend a listening ear and just like listen to them and try to understand what they're trying to communicate to me.
Right.
Yeah. I'm gonna say one more thing. Sorry, Mash, if you were trying
Yeah.
to move on.
No, I was done.
Which was like, it's like a critical thing you just brought up about empathy of when we're in cultures different to our own. And I don't mean cultures just like different countries or different regions of the world, but even like your culture, like if I am a progressive liberal minded person and if I'm with someone who might be like much more conservative, like the culture clash in between. Just kind of seeing what's been happening in our news and politics and things like that. Like we love throwing around the word like, oh, we empathize with everybody, but it's like, actually, like, is it easy to empathize with people who hold very, very, very different opinions and thought processes than our own? Because I actually think it's really difficult, and like the active work of being able to parse apart our differences and like actively listen and trying to understand, it's much harder than throwing around like the buzzword of empathy. And I think if we can be more in tune with that, like if we can be in tune with, oh, we're about to walk into a situation that's very different to my like baseline understanding of X, Y, and Z. And I, as a designer, have like done the internal work to like know that this is going to be different to what I hold sacred. And now I'm gonna like enter this conversation with an open mind. I think we can't assume that we can empathize with every situation, every culture, every person. But if we can like walk in knowing that and like addressing our biases, I feel like we might be in a better place.
Right. I say one more thing and then can move on. Like I just remember Patricia Moore. She's an industrial designer. What she did was, I don't know how many years ago, but a long time ago in terms of design, she basically create simulated the experience of being old for a year. She would put bandage around her joints so she cannot move as freely, and she would dress as a old woman with makeup and like walk in New York City. like take a walk slowly, and basically she was just recording down how people interact with her in the street as an old woman in fast pace of New York City, and how can she survive with limited mobility in the public transportation of the city. And she wrote this book about her experience, and like she started like basically her focus became designing for elderlies. So there are things that we can do, like she did an amazing job of trying that experience, but again, I don't know if it's 100%. It brings you closer to the situation for sure, and it takes a lot of energy and resources to do that. And unfortunately, I don't think in day-to-day life we always have that luxury to create those type of situations to get a better understanding of our users. But I think we can push for it, definitely. There's still something we need to do as designers, as I don't know, industry, to like get closer to the experience of our users.
Yeah, I think talking about empathy, and also like what you guys talk about, like not being able to connect with people who you don't know that well, who are like not in your immediate social circle. So I think that's happening. I feel like I'm seeing it more on media these days, especially with like the whole Black Lives Matter, etc., and that whole like friction between white supremacy and like the othering of like blacks and browns, etc. So do you feel like outrage is like productive when you're fighting for human rights, or does it like immediately, once you show anger, people are actually like try to like, oh man, this one, like they don't even know how to talk, so they just immediately like try to tune you out, etc. So I was just wondering like how productive is outrage in this whole process?
I think this is my theory. It doesn't need to be 100% true, but that's how I based on the experience that I've seen, outrage as a way of protesting usually is the last thing people use when they don't have any other medium to voice out their concerns, as a mass, as a community, not individual. And then if this is your only channel, I think it's needed. Yeah, someone needs to hear you. And again, personal opinion, but of course, harming other people leads in no good, but grabbing people's attention, it's something that you need to do when you're in extreme situations. And when you are dealing with a situation that no one is hearing you, listening to you for a long period of time, maybe that's the only thing you can do. Anger 100 years ago helped women to get voting rights in the US. They did the same thing. So it works. It's not pleasant. It's not something that anybody enjoys. But if you have no other way, there's something needed. But what we can ask from ourselves is that, okay, when that happens as an outsider, as someone that you are not necessarily discriminated or dealing with the same issue, what's your role in it? How can you do conflict resolution? How can you channel that anger in a productive path to help those people to achieve what they're trying to achieve, or help them to be understood by people that are not necessarily listening to them? That's my view on anger and outrage. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think my perspective is the same, which is on a baseline, I don't think anybody wakes up and is like, today is the day I'm going to be an angry person all day long. Like, I think there's something that propels that. There's like years and generations of silencing and violence that propels people to then be outraged and enraged and angry. And I feel like, I think you asked something about like, how does our trade support that, or like, what does our trade, where do we sit? And I think for me, it's like a lot of it is about the shaping of the narratives. Like um, when certain groups, I mean, I saw this a lot on social media, like when certain groups were protesting because they didn't want to wear masks or wanted to go get haircuts during COVID, it's covered in media, in the news, in our society, with different types of language than it is when people are protesting for Black Lives Matter or anything like that. So it's just like, as designers in society, I feel like a big responsibility we have and a role we have to play is like the narratives we're shaping and the narratives we are creating. And so even something as simple as like bringing it back to the design process, like when we're writing insights, can we check ourselves of like the type of language we use when we write insights? When we make personas and archetypes, can we check ourselves and make sure that we're not like stereotyping certain narratives that have been part of our like world and society for a long time? So I think like our responsibility is to just continue to educate ourselves through non like traditional media, like make sure we're really like understanding those stories from multiple perspectives and making sure that when we take that into our work, we're representing all of those different perspectives.
Yeah, I think like I'm reading See No Strangers these days, so I think I had a different perception of this whole concept. And then when I was reading it, then what she wrote kind of made sense to her, because I think she was talking about like revolutionary love, and then saying like this like what you spoke to is like it's like generations of it's like, so it's like when they don't have an outlet, like when they're like continuously being denied of what their rights and being given access and being like belittled and like spoken to not with respect, etc., then people like obviously it triggers them, like, okay, I've had enough now, like I'm only human, I'm going to like you like have like a boiling point and like lash out. So I think what I liked about what she wrote was that like it's like it has a purpose. So it's not like when if someone is communicating something, it's like that burst of anger, it has purpose to it. They're just not venting it out because they're talking like with outrage. It has a purpose of how they're doing it. So I like that thing of like, so you when you're like seeing someone who's like having an outburst, you need to see them with wonder and see them with care, etc. Like, okay, they're doing it for a purpose, not just that they're lashing out for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody lashes out with no reason, to be honest. Like it might be unjust, the reason, but there is always a reason that you're angry, and they not need to be heard. And having the ears to listen to people, it's something that it's not common. It's not, especially when it comes to minorities. It's historical. It's like generation after generations that they have suffered from certain things and certain discriminations. And finally, at some point, someone is going to say something. We need to change it. It should, like, it's been the human history. We are trying to get better. We are trying to fight for equality and equity, and like all of these things. It's something that we all talk about, but we don't know that other people don't have it sometimes, if you're on the privileged side of the conversation. So yeah.
No, I just want to thank you guys for taking the time out again and having this like thoughtful conversation with me today. And especially thank you, Ankita, for waking up super early in the morning. It's like, I know we're all in different time zones right now. So for making this happen and engaging with me, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It felt like we were in a transdisciplinary debate seminar class.
Yeah.
Except we just agreed with each other.
That's true. We should have like a opposing side to it as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting us. It was fun.
Yeah, good to see you, Melly.
Yeah.
You too.
Bye.
So
Bye.
bye. Yeah, I'll let Ankita start her day. Bye.